got into small boats by a fluke of nature, put in an application to get in the amphibious force, and then immediately put in an application to get into small boats. And so the first thing I knew, I was at Solomon, Maryland in boat training. And then once we got to the land part of the training, which was the simpler part, go down there to dock and get into boats and go around and run them out on the beach. Then we got all of that training and got put together in a big boat group and sent to the Henrico. Then on the first part of February, we took off to the United Kingdom. I wasn't doing too good in school. I had quit school. And Daddy had put me to work in the fields, and he wasn't the best boss in the world. And I guess at 15, I was just at that stage in life where most boys have a hard time. And I wanted out of my situation, and a lot of the guys that were being drafted that were a little older than me, some of the guys were volunteering, some of them were volunteering for the Navy. And so I got the idea that that'd be a way out for me. They told me in the Navy recruiting office that they thought I was a little too young. But if I'd bring my parents down there to sign for me, that I was 17, they'd let me in. So I went home and I guess you might call it browbeat my family into coming down and signing for me. And they went down and signed it. I was 17 years old and let me in. And I guess I did like it because about 4 months later, the birth certificates caught up with me, and they found out that I was actually 15, and they called me on the carpet and talked to me about it. And so they asked me, did I want to stay or did I want to get out? And I told them no, I wanted to stay. So they wrote my mother a letter and told her that this business of me being 17 was all a big lie, and they'd found out about it. What did she want to do? Did she want to get me out of there or take me out, or did she want to leave me in there or what? So she just simply wrote him back and said Joe wanted to get in there, and I agreed to sign for him to go in and leave it up to him if he wants to stay or get out. So they left it up to me, and I wanted to stay. We practiced over and over and over again. We'd get the boats on board. We'd go to some place along the shores of England. We'd drop boats in the water, load them up with troops, and make a landing. We'd go around to some port and pick up a bunch more troops and come back and do the same thing over again. We did that continuously until we got it down right. We did it enough times that we had it down right. We knew we were getting ready for something because the training was intensifying. The troops we were getting were more battle ready. The equipment they had was more battle ready. You know, we was on station and anchored the next morning, about 3 or 4 o'clock. I think we dropped anchor around 4 o'clock or maybe a little before that. I know we put the boats in the water around 4. They didn't tell us until after we left port that night that we were going to hit Normandy. We come alongside and they had cargo nets rolled down the side of the ship. One end of the cargo net tied to the deck with a handrail. And when we come alongside, two of the men would grab the cargo net and pull it over into the bottom of it, over into the boat. And then the troops would start coming down that cargo net. And the boat's coming up and down like this, alongside the ship, you know, probably 8 or 10 foot rise and fall. And as it come up, the soldiers just peel off of that net. When the time came, we started toward the beach, and we were set to hit the beach at exactly a certain time, which each one of the waves was situated 6 minutes apart. It was getting pretty light by then, and as far as you could see in any direction, there was boats 50 feet apart, and all headed full board to the beach. Well, when I left the rendezvous area at the ship, I knew that there was still firing going on the beach. But then when we got in, it also was machine guns being fired. See, the Air Force had bombed that place for
about
5 or 6 days,
just constantly, day and night. And our ships, our battle wagons had dropped tons and tons of shells over the beach trying to blast everything, off the planet. And all of that stopped just a few minutes before the first wave hit. The trip to the beach was as bad as it gets. A heavy loaded boat making 10 knots in 8-foot high seas is bad. Cold water breaking over the bow soaked everything, clothes, equipment and all. Freezing cold wind made it almost unbearable. It began getting light enough now I could see our troops. Some were squatting down, very quiet, and some said the rosary, and some praying to their own belief, some curled up shivering, some either cold or afraid or both. Some crying, and they're all soaking wet and seasick. But as it happened, about 20 minutes before we landed, the Germans could see the ships out there, so they were able to, in 20 minutes, to get ready for some of it. The trip to the beach lasted well over an hour of pure hell. In the early light, I could make out hundreds of boats scattered as far as I could see, headed for the beach. We were headed for easy red sector of Omaha Beach. There were light poles, cross ties, railroad steel, A-beams, pipes, etc. in the water.
It's seen on any beach until you get closer and closer, and then you see what's there, a lot of dead bodies and a lot of soldiers behind obstacles and shooting at the people up on the cliff.
The beach was just littered with bodies of troops that had landed just before us. So was the water. The foam at the water's edge was red with blood. When we dropped the ramp, the Germans really opened up on us with machine guns, and the troops started debarking. Killing most of them before they even got off the end of the ramp. The last troops off stomped and stumbled over the bodies of their fallen comrades. That was the most horrible sight. That was the most horrible sight I've ever seen. We were all very busy at this point. One man was hauled clearing the ramp of the bodies and wounded, pulling them into the boat, and I was totally preoccupied with the boat handling, trying to get us out of there. The trip back to the ship, we headed into the heavy seas. It was rough. Waves were breaking over the bow, and everything was drenched. Salt water and a dozen wounded men injuries. Man, it must have been torture. We could do nothing more for them than to try to stop some of the worst bleeding. We had a few shots of morphine in, so we gave the worst ones a half shot each. Before I left home, a skinned knee and a mashed toe was life-threatening. I could not comprehend as much suffering as this. I remember one of my seamen somewhere on the return trip back eased up beside me and at the wheel, and he said, that was a son of a bitch, wasn't it? And I said, yeah, you got that right. We were hoisted aboard the Enrico, and as the dead and wounded unloaded, I stood aside, and tears just, they washed my face. I sat down and I cried like a baby.
If it hadn't been for the weather, we would have landed on the 4th of June, and we would have been able to have landed further out in the dark, and our men would have been able to have got across that sand and to the butt of that cliff, and maybe partly up that cliff before it got daylight. That didn't happen. We lost 6,000 men there in 15 minutes on Omaha Beach. And people call me a hero, World War II hero. And I tell them, and I think it's just a way of bypassing the issue maybe, but I tell them that the heroes are still out there. We're the survivors. I was one of the ones that lucked out and didn't get hit. And in a situation like we were at, especially at Normandy, it was just a turn of the cards that got any of us through that, you know. So if you lived through it, you were lucky. So the guy that caught a bullet, what makes me any more of a hero than him? You know, he's the one that gave all of it, I didn't. What I felt when I went into the beach at Cicely was the same thing, the same apprehension that I felt when I was going into the beach at Normandy. How bad is it gonna be? Are we gonna get blown out of the water? I hope not. I hope I can get my boat in, get my soldiers unloaded, and get out of there before anything happens. So one of them is not any more important than the other one. Out of 4 invasions, that same thing prevailed in my mind. We had been trained, and we had been talked to and told what we could expect on the beaches. And it was the same in Normandy, it was the same in southern France, and it was the same in Okinawa. If you watch a bunch of war movies and you get your mind polluted with Hollywood instead of reality. And what I can tell you is reality. It's not Hollywood.